I assume most of you have heard of our little project. Most of you likely who drove here today consumed gasoline that moved down our pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby. It's been in operation for 60 years. And we're planning to undertake a project to spend about $5.5 billion to expand the capacity of that line to serve largely growing markets abroad. That's all I'm going to say about Trans Mountain and the project specifically. During the question and answer, if there's anything you want to chat about, we certainly can, if you want more details. The topic I was asked to comment on was getting to yes. That's not maybe, that's not perhaps, that's not yes but. So we remain very focused on how do we get to yes. What are all of the considerations, what are all of the facets of conversation and debate that we need to engage in order to get to yes? Yes doesn't necessarily mean unanimous. It doesn't mean to say that there aren't impacts. It doesn't mean to say there aren't effects. But it most certainly means that the broad public interest of our country and all of the people whose communities and lives we impact are thought about, considered, and in some way addressed. The challenge in getting to yes has changed significantly. And it's changed. I did an interview with the Wall Street Journal yesterday, and the reporter asked me, so what's the new normal now? How did the new normal get redefined? And when did it get redefined? The first phase of our project, and you probably won't even know this, was completed in 2008. We spent about $750 million expanding the pipeline route between Hinton, Alberta, and Valemount, BC, through Jasper National Park, Mount Robson Provincial Park, World UNESCO Heritage Sites. We removed trees. We disrupted traffic. We impacted the use of the parks for a period of time. We crossed streams. We crossed rivers. We had agreements with First Nations communities on either side of those parks. And we did so, at the end of the day, accomplishing a feat that many didn't think we could. We left the parks and the regions better after than what we found. We won an environmental award for the work that we did. And we left a legacy in the parks that they're still benefiting from. So we proved that we could build a pipeline through some of the most environmentally sensitive, highly focused terrain on the planet, frankly. And we did so in a way that you probably didn't read much about. You probably didn't see any protests. You probably saw very little media around. What's changed since then? That was 6 years ago. I don't know all of the factors that have changed. We know that there have been a good number of tragic events in the energy industry over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, from BP Macondo to Marshall to Lac-Mégantic. That has brought a focus on the industry like never before. We also know that the ability to express one's views and have one's views heard by a great number of people in a very quick period of time has dramatically changed. The ability to voice an opposition or create an emotional fear is much, much more prevalent today than it was just 5 or 6 years ago. We also know, I think, from the work that we've been doing on the ground, that there is a much, much greater link today between the social values and important aspects of community to those things that affect it, whether that's industry, it's development, or it's resource extraction. The linkage between those activities and the well-being and the social and the community aspects are much, much more closely knit today and much more closely held. As I was once quoted to say, NIMBYism isn't NIMBYism to a NIMBY. It's about caring about their community and the impacts and how industry is affecting their lives. So much has changed. So the conversations you'll have today, the conversation that Ian and I, the only panel in the world with 2 Ians on it, by the way, are part of a whole string of conversations that are happening all over the place I've chatted with the Association of Canadian Biologists. I've chatted with the Financial Executive Institute of Canada. I've chatted with the Probus Club, Chambers of Commerce, Boards of Trades, First Nations communities about these very questions. How do we change the relationship between the energy industry and the projects that we're seeking to undertake and the communities that we're affecting? How do we reconcile between national interest and local interest? How do we consider all of the prosperity that's being created and how that prosperity is shared, both amongst communities, amongst provinces, and amongst the First Nations communities that we touch? So how do we react to that? From day one on our project, the mantra has been listen, listen, and listen. Seek to understand the point of view of that person that you're hearing. Seek to understand where it comes from. What's it based on? What are its beliefs and values? Not what the emotion that's involved in it is, but what's underneath it, so we can find a way to reconcile. We can find a way to look for an intersection of common alignment. Respect those views. Respect the views of others that aren't just yours. And one of the most important features I think that we've learned along this path on this project has been our ability to influence and advocate beyond our own world. We've learned that whether the debate's about the oil sands, or it's about marine traffic, or it's about the safe transit of tankers through Burrard Inlet, or whether it's about marine response capability, there are many aspects to our business that touch communities and people outside of the narrow scope of a pipeline between Edmonton and Burnaby. So how can we exert our influence into those spaces to get more for the communities? How can we push the limits of our influence and advocate on behalf of those who want tankers to be slower, to be quieter when they're at port, to be more respectful of the neighborhoods that are around them when they're docked waiting to come into our port facility? How do we influence where Transport Canada and the Coast Guard want to place first response capability? How do we attach that to the values of the marine community that the South Coast Salish people hold so dearly and importantly to their lives? How do we connect those things? So we found that there's been opportunities for us to invest time and energy to connect dots that 2 years ago when we started on this project, I didn't even know existed. I imagined a pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby as being a pipeline from Edmonton to Burnaby, and that's what the debate and the conversation would be about. Well, it certainly isn't. It's much broader than that. It was mentioned earlier that trust is a key facet of what we're trying to accomplish. I try not to use the word social license. I don't know really what it means. I don't really know how you get it exactly, or where you apply, or which form you fill out, or who tells you, in fact, if you have it. I get lots of people coming to me saying, you know, Ian, if you did this, you'd get social license. Or if you did that, you'd better get the license of my community. Well, it's not one or two things. It's about who you are, it's about how trusted you are, and it's about the relationship you have with the people you affect. So the people you affect are your shareholders, your employees, the communities that you draw employees from, the places where your pipeline runs, the communities it runs through, the First Nations community whose development plans within the reserve are limited because of the right-of-way of the pipeline going through their yards and their community. It's about building the trust and relationships along that path and understanding that there are many things that are influencing people's opinions. And that's the other great thing that we're challenged with in getting to yes. The debates and the conversations we're having aren't about just a pipeline. They might be about the oil sands. They might be about the environmental footprint of the oil sands. It might be about the safety of tanker traffic. It might be about climate change. It might be about foreign trade. It might be about local benefits and jobs and employment. It might be about emergency response capabilities and the safety net that the regulations provide for that. So that's what makes this task that we have so complicated. And too often I have found people in positions in my industry have looked for the simple path through. They've looked for the engineered path through. Let's sit down and strategize. Let's develop a plan. Let's articulate the tactics we're going to take, and let's get from here to there. That should be what we need to do. Well, it's not what we need to do. There's no plan. There's no set of steps. Every community is different. Every aspiration within a First Nations community is different. They all fundamentally want the same things. They want shared prosperity for the resources that are on the lands that they hold. So let's figure out how to do that. And there's many creative ways to do that, and it's not necessarily all the same. Each one is different. So the task of reconciling all of those debates must take you into, as I say, the tough corners. We can't win this. We can't accomplish what we're striving to accomplish in the boardrooms in Calgary. We can't accomplish it in the towers in Vancouver. We accomplish it on the ground, listening and understanding and reconciling and building the trust and relationship we need to. As I said at the beginning, it's not unanimous. Nothing ever is unanimous. But at least at the end of the day, I believe we can get to an in-depth conversation about how we do these things. And the conversation on our project is definitely changing. I had the pleasure 2 weeks ago of conducting some telephone town halls. I'd never done it before. And over the course of 2 evenings, I spoke to 20,000 people in the Lower Mainland. Vancouver, Burnaby, Chilliwack, Abbotsford, Langley, Surrey. And it was very telling, both the tone of that conversation that I had with those people. I think I fielded somewhere between 20 to 30 calls a night over the course of a couple of nights that were listened to, as I say, by up to 20,000 people. And the tone of those calls were very much focused on how. How do we protect our interest? How do we ensure benefits are accrued to the local communities? How do we ensure that the regulatory safety nets exist? How do we ensure that we can trust you as a citizen within our communities to keep us safe, given the industry you're in? So I'm very encouraged by that. I think the conversation is changing. I think days like today help change that. I think they help broaden our minds to the issues that we face and the challenges that are before us. It's not simple. It's really hard work. Ask my wife how hard the work is. I'm home a couple of days a week at most. But that's where it is. That's where the effort has to be put, is with people like you, with people in the communities that we touch and impact. So those are the challenges before us, and there's no easy path through. It's a hard path through. It takes time, it takes effort, and it takes, I think, a commitment beyond what industry has been practicing in the past. But at the end of the day, we know one thing. Canada is a wealth of resources that the world wants to buy. How do we get our products to market? Whether that's oil or natural gas or potash or lumber or sulfur or mineral concentrates, you name it, we as a nation have a wealth of resources the world wants to buy. And from that wealth of resources comes prosperity. From that prosperity, we share amongst our communities. We invest in the technologies of tomorrow that are going to bridge us to a cleaner, less fossil fuel reliant future for our generations to come. That's how we get there, is through prosperity and investment. And BC is key to that. It's the start of Canada. It also is the start of the global trade. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Ian, for your insights. I now invite the other Ian with two eyes, to come up on the stage here, so help keep them straight. Ian Black, President and CEO of the Board of Trade, will now have a moderated discussion with some questions, I believe, from our Policy Council, and also some of your questions. So if you do have the question cards that you've had a chance to complete, please just hold them in the air, and our staff will gather them and bring them up to the stage. Ian, as many of you may know, was a cabinet minister in MLA for 7 years, so knows how to get to the bottom of some issues and have a good discussion. So both of you, good luck.
Thanks, David. We'll get right to it. So ladies and gentlemen, I do two things here. I remind you that you have these little cards on your table. I've got enough questions here to fill the 20 minutes. I'd rather hear your questions. So if you have a couple, please do write them down, and my colleagues will just hold them up in the air just like this. My colleagues will come grab them, they'll bring them up, and we'll insert them into the dialogue. Thanks for doing this.
You bet.
And welcome back. So the theme of today is keeping pace with global change. And I'm going to start with a couple of kind of quick questions that are kind of related. So you had two stories, in my view, in the last 48 hours that are kind of consistent with that. The first is the European Union declassifying the products out of the oil sands and no longer considering them dirty oil. Good politics, how relevant is that?
Well, it's nice to hear you're only seeing two stories in 48 hours. I think I saw about 14 relevant stories in the last 48 hours. But it definitely is a good signal. Whether it's based upon free trade or politics or science, we like to believe it's going to be based on science. It's definitely a great signal for Canada and the oil sands producers to have a union like Europe conclude that the oil produced out of the oil sands is no different than many other oils around the world. It's definitely a great sign.
All right, so bringing that closer to home, it wasn't so much a story, but as I was driving yesterday and again this morning, I heard the first of the radio ads from the current mayor of Vancouver leading into the election cycle, and the ads very clearly are using the exact quote is taking a firm stand. It names your firm specifically. It says Kinder Morgan, so they don't pull any punches. Let's talk about that for a second. You got the city of Vancouver. Where do they stand from a constitutional standpoint or a jurisdictional authority standpoint? Is there some action that can actually be taken here, or is this good PR for the constituent voters that the mayor's trying to gather? What's your take on that? What do you do? How do you deal with Vancouver?
As many will know, it took me many, many months to get the ear of the mayor of Vancouver and actually have a conversation with him. I did so several months ago. And without getting into the details of that conversation, the mayor of Vancouver is, in my mind, concerned about two things broadly. He's concerned about the safety and the image of Vancouver. And in his mind, being an oil export port and terminal doesn't reconcile with his green vision for Vancouver. I think that there is a bigger climate change agenda within the mayor's portfolio, if you like. I think there's no surprise that he's been an advocate for our hearing to consider climate change more prominently. So I think, he comes from a fairly values, principle-based environmental position that climate change is occurring, that the oil sands contribute to that, and that therefore we should limit the amount of trade of that. We should leave it in the ground, and we should really forego the prosperity that comes with it. How he then weaves that into his political campaign and the rhetoric, I think we're starting to see that. We don't need anything directly from the city of Vancouver. Our pipeline, our project does not touch the city of Vancouver. They are a part, obviously, of the greater Vancouver region, of the lower mainland region. There's some air permitting things that we need from the region. We don't need anything specifically from the city of Vancouver. So, it's concerning to me how municipal officials these days are using their position and their opinions to influence public opinion and to broadcast the claims and assertions that they are. But as far as Vancouver goes, we don't need anything specifically from them.
Well, your project doesn't touch Vancouver, but it does touch Burnaby.
A little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. What are you going to do with Burnaby? I mean, at the end of the day, I'm reminded of the 3rd century paradox about an unstoppable force hitting an immovable object. You've got the mayor there, Derek Corrigan. This has become his crusade. How do you talk to this guy? Where do you go from here on this? At what point do you throw up your arms, or do you even have that option?
I had my boss in Houston ask me the other day, what are we going to do in Burnaby? How are we going to deal with Burnaby? And what's the plan? And as I said earlier, we like to develop plans and tactics and strategies and then execute on them as business people. It's an hour-by-hour issue with Burnaby. It's day-to-day. We don't quite know where it will end up. We've been operating in Burnaby for 60 years. We've been paying almost $7 million a year to the city of Burnaby every year. That would go up to $14 million each year if the project is successful. We've had a close relationship with the community for decades. The mayor and I haven't talked now for a couple of years. The door is closed there. And really it's sad because I talked earlier about getting to how. And how is a critically important debate and conversation to have to reconcile where the differences are. Well, we can't have that conversation in Burnaby right now. So where we go from here, I think, is we've got a constitutional question before the National Energy Board that's being heard tomorrow. That constitutional question is going to debate and conclude the relationship between municipal laws and federally regulated jurisdiction. So it will place that in its correct order. Ultimately, we're a federally regulated project, and therefore federal legislation will prevail. How Burnaby then reacts to that, we'll see. You know, you've read a lot and heard a lot about Burnaby Mountain and 7 trees that we cut down. Burnaby claims it's 13. We claim it's 7, and I guess it depends on the age of the tree, whether it's a shrub or a tree. But the backdrop to that is enlightening, because we're investigating tunneling through Burnaby Mountain for a couple of kilometers of the project so that we can take the pipeline out of the community, out of the roads, out of the neighborhood, out of the boulevards, and put it into a totally benign location. It's not on the surface of the Burnaby Mountain Conservation Park. It's 200 to 300 meters within the heart of the mountain is where we would be tunneling. So we need to do the investigative work to see if that's feasible. So Burnaby residents are caught in the middle right now of a debate between ourselves and the mayor and their lawyers. We're just dealing with it day by day, Ian. We're always open to talk. We're always open to engage with the mayor and his council, and I hope one day we will.
Is there any one issue, though? I mean, do you get the sense from, I mean, whether you're limited as we are by media reports or whether you've got more insights because of your more intimate involvement there, is there any one issue? I mean, is it tank terminal issues? Is it safety, marine or otherwise? Is it 2007 and the incidents around that? Is it the fact that Corrigan is now positioning himself as an environmentalist? Or is it just raw politics? I mean, is there one issue that pops up, or is it a blend? What's your take on that?
I think it's a blend of all of it. I think for one reason or another, the incident that occurred in Burnaby July 24th, 2007, 12:24 in the afternoon, when a city-operated contracted backhoe struck our pipe, and the effects of that on the community and on our relationship started a path where the mayor, out of his own decision-making and wisdom, has lost all trust in us. He's lost trust in what we do and how we do it, and he's translating that into the community. And his voice is heard in that community. He's been the mayor for a long time. He's loved by a lot of people in Burnaby, and so his voice is heard. So that's created a public opinion froth, if you like, that has been damaging for us, that we're, through the campaigns like you saw, looking to gain back some of that trust and confidence. So I think that there was, the incident in 2007 started down a path, and how he's now using it politically is really his own decision, Ian.
Well, you talked about trust, so let's go there. Trust, I mean, I heard something the other day that you've had 400 meetings in the last 2 years on this topic. Is that accurate, by the way? 400?
That's about right, yeah.
So 400 meetings in the last 2 years, and yet you're doing so in a context where people don't trust. The skepticism is there with respect to trusting companies, trusting politicians, trusting the media. We do an event every January, the Idleman Trust Barometer, which is well attended, mainly by CEOs, because it focuses on this. This is now a really, really big deal. Why should people trust you?
I think that people can trust us. I don't want to think that they should. I think that you need to earn that. So I think they can trust us by looking at our record, looking at our history, looking at the value we bring to communities. But I've had 400 meetings on that topic, because what we find is when people actually sit down and talk to you, and when you actually listen to them, the trust automatically starts to build, because they see that we're not a faceless corporation that doesn't care about the people, that doesn't care about safety, that there is an inherent positive culture that we have and we bring to this project that is trustworthy. So we've got to be trustworthy. And that comes from those meetings. It comes from being totally open and transparent about the existing pipeline that's been there for 60 years. We take communities out to digs that we do. We take First Nations chiefs and councils and elders on tours of the pipeline, the right-of-way, so they can see it, the condition it's in. Those are the kinds of things we need to do. Pipelines out of sight, out of mind for decades. We're now on the cusp of a pipeline build-out in this country that we haven't seen in 50 or 60 years. So we're having to reacquaint people with what pipelines are, what they do, and why they're safe. And part of that means lifting a veil that's been there for decades. And that's why some of this work is so hard. The other part of the trust that you touched on is we've got the benefit of world-class regulatory agencies in this country. World-class in terms of their mandate, their discipline, their authority, and quite frankly, their efforts on companies like me to remain safe. It's not just happenstance that we have a safety program, an integrity program, a natural hazard program, that we do digs and emergency response exercises. Those things are all looked at by our regulator to ensure that they're world class and to ensure that the safety of the public is being maintained. And the public, I think has grown somewhat cynical to the political aspects of regulation and that safety net, but I can assure you it's world class. And these pipelines aren't considered lightly. You saw Northern Gateway with over 200 conditions that need to be met to be built. We'll have a list of conditions as well that we'll need to satisfy. So the regulator goes far into the depths of our business before ever granting any approval.
So with all the changes, and you described some of them at the microphone over the last 5 years, I mean, clearly social media communication, awareness, resulting cynicism, resulting ability to broadcast angst very quickly to, literally millions of people instantly. Within all of that, you're trying to run a company. And you're a subsidiary of a much larger company on a global stage. How have the changes that you were describing, this is a question that's coming from, it's actually a great question, from Janice Plumstead. Forgive me, Janice, if I mispronounced your last name. And I'm going to paraphrase it just a wee bit. To navigate your way through the changes you described at the microphone a few moments ago, and some of them that you just touched on now, that, I imagine, has impacted your company in some fashion and the culture of your company. So Janice's question is, how has the change in getting to yes impacted the culture of Kinder Morgan?
You're right, we are a big company. We're the third largest energy company in North America, the largest pipeline operator in North America. My friends and colleagues and bosses in Houston don't always quite get that list of issues that I took you through, or challenges. They face different ones themselves. So I think the change in my company here in Canada has been realizing that this need to listen, understand, and respond is not optional. It's what we do and how we do it. I'm encouraged by the fact that our turnover rate in our company is almost zero. I literally get resumes and I get people approaching me every day wanting to come and work on this project. And that's not just because they have a good or a service they want to sell. It's because they believe and they see how we're approaching it and what we're doing differently. And I think that that's been accepted by a wide number of people within the organization and contractors that we have. They believe in it, they believe, they trust, and it's encouraging to me that we're so sought after as an employer right now.
So the related question from Colin Bennett from Apache Canada. The energy industry has tended to focus on the technical. However, the challenges are local and relationships are key. What does industry need to do to better and what does industry need to do better? And specifically, what do you look for in the people that you need to lead that conversation?
Yeah, it requires a commitment, and it requires a belief and a vision that not everybody holds. We quite carefully handpicked the team that we have working on this project from the experience of the Vancouver Olympics and everything it had to go through here in Vancouver and British Columbia to get accepted by the people and to be as successful as it was, and from elsewhere. We didn't hire consultants and contracted firms, we hired individuals. And we built a team, I think, that embodies the belief in kind of the vision that we have. And I think that more corporations need to do that. I think that more leaders in our industry need to leave the boardroom, put on their boots, get in the truck and drive around and start to understand what the people are saying. Because we will get our permit. We will get approval from our regulators to build this with conditions. I'm quite confident of that. That does not give us the permission. The permission is what we're earning every day. And I think that more and more in conversations we're having, I'm hearing more and more leaders look at our experience and looking to emulate it into their businesses, because I think this is an on-the-ground battle, and we need to take it on the ground.
So you're into this for a couple of years.
Yep.
You're not done yet. Clearly lots of work and roadblocks in front of you yet to be navigated. What surprised you the most, or what have you learned yourself in the 2 years that you're into this so far? How do you see things differently today than you did a couple of years ago? And what are some of those kind of little humility aha moments that have caused you to reflect and how you're going to change going forward?
A few things have surprised me. One thing that surprised me has been, and I touched on it earlier, that the degree of cynicism that exists between the general public towards our regulatory authorities and the legislation that we work within that is designed to safeguard and protect the people and the environment. So that surprised me. The other thing that surprised me is in a different way, John's world and the First Nations relationships. When we started the project work 2 to 3 years ago, that was going to be a monumental effort. It was going to be difficult to overcome. It was going to be challenging to reconcile what we had to offer with the prosperity we're trying to share. That has, for me personally, dramatically shifted in the last 2 years to be one where the opportunity we have to share that prosperity is far greater than I ever thought it would be. The opportunity to create bodies of excellence around environmental protection, around stream and river crossing protection, around first responder capabilities, around marine safety, around marine ecosystem study and research, all through the lens of First Nations communities, has been far broader than I ever thought it would be. I expected that to be a kilometer by kilometer battle to accomplish what we're designing to do. It's now become, for me, a watershed of opportunity that I didn't know existed, and it's gotten very creative. We've allowed it to get creative. So on the positive side, that surprised me. The third aspect to it, I think that has surprised me, is on a project that has a development life of a few years and a construction life of a few years, we're always in somebody's election lens. Whether it's federal, provincial, municipal, there's always an impending election that is influencing the tone of the conversation and some of that public froth that occurs from the rhetoric that's inherent in those campaigns. So that's been a lot of work too.
So we've reached the witching hour where we've got to shut her down here and continue with the day. But let me suggest a couple of things. I suspect I'm not the only one in this room that recognized that, Ian's a guy that got introduced as a finance guy in his history and a solid pedigree in that area. Your command of the details of this, I think, reflects the 400 meetings. My suspicion is you have at least another 400 in front of you. But I do want to take an opportunity to say thank you for doing this. I was left with a couple of questions from the audience, so my apologies, I didn't get to all of them. But I believe there's someone coming up to say thanks on behalf of the group, but let me say thank you for doing this on behalf of the Vancouver Board of Trade. I know you're a busy guy. This is a big conversation, and you're central to it, so thank you for taking the time to share some
Well,
thoughts.
thanks very much, Ian.
Ian Anderson,
Appreciate
ladies
it.
and gentlemen.
Thanks.